Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Sanobar Sultan and I'm here with another video on Sanobar's World. Today I will be discussing how to excel in the essay paper, in the essay exam of the civil service exam, which I have also taken. And in my very first video which I uploaded on Sanobar's World, I discussed my journey of CSS from the academics to my current profession, that is. So a lot of you wanted me to put up videos about my CSS journey and how to excel in the CSS exam. That's why I decided that today I will be discussing the essay paper, which unfortunately many candidates fail to pass. So today I will be discussing in detail. I will be telling you how to select the topic. I will be telling you how to write an outline. I will be telling you how to write an introduction, a paragraph, and a conclusion. So basically everything about an essay writing. So let's just get right to it. Now there are three things that I would like to clarify before we go directly to the point where I start with the outline or the selection of the topic. These are three things that you must keep in mind if you are to start writing an essay. Number 1 point, grammatical mistakes and spelling mistakes are lethal for an English exam. I do not want to demotivate you, but rather I want to give you a reality check that if you are somebody who has spelling mistakes, if you are somebody who makes grammatical errors, then you must rectify them beforehand and must work on your grammatical mistakes and your spelling mistakes before we can move on to writing a good essay or an essay for that matter. So work on your grammar, work on your spellings, because you know, if the examiner sees a grammatical mistake on the first few pages of the paper, which he'll probably read, then that's lethal. That's not something that an English examiner might forgive. So you don't want to take that risk. So if you make those kind of mistakes, then work on them before we can get to the point where whether this is a good outline or not. Number 2, I would like to bust a myth really. There is a myth that is associated that if you use difficult vocabulary, then you may be able to pass the English exam. No, dear audience, this is only a myth. Writing flowery English, writing archaic words of from the British dictionary will not make you pass the exam. That is not compulsory. That has no reality check at all to it. You only need to write simple English. You need to write something that gets your point across. If your writing is simple and what you're trying to argue comes across to the examiner, then that's fine. You don't need any difficult words, especially if you are not sure about their spelling, especially if you're not sure what they even mean, but you've just heard them or you've read them and you want to use them in your vocabulary. I wouldn't recommend that. It's better to play safe. It's better to use the kind of vocabulary which you have heard, which you know the meanings of, and not to take risks like that. So yes, that's a myth that if you use difficult vocabulary, then you will pass the essay exam. So I would like to bust that myth. Number 3rd point, before we begin essay writing, is a lot of people question what kind of books should we read? Which essay books should we read to pass the exam? My answer to that is that you don't need to read any books for the essay exam. Yes, you heard it right. You do not need to read a book about how to write an essay, nor do you need to read a book about content writing in the paragraph making of the essay. Why is that? Now this lecture is specific only to the CSS candidates, as you can imagine. So if you are a CSS candidate and you are preparing for an essay exam, that means you are also studying for the other 11 subjects, because there are 12 in total, the subjects for CSS. That means you have the required information for other subjects. You are studying for current affairs, you are studying for international relations, you are studying for Pakistan affairs, you are studying sciences, you are studying Islamiyat, you are studying American history, European history, languages. So you're studying a diversity of subjects. And what you need to do is that you have to understand that the information that you have acquired from those subjects, from those 11 subjects, is sufficient for you to apply in your paragraph writing of CS, of the essay exam. So no, you do not need any extra information. The information that you have is sufficient and you should utilize it in your essay paper. That is the way to go for it. So no, you do not need to read any extra books for essay. Whatever information you have, it is sufficient. Now that we have got that out of the way, let's get to the point of an essay exam. So you see, you're sitting in the exam hall and the paper is in front of you. Now you will see a series of essay titles, on your exam paper. Now how do you select a topic? Number one, which we will discuss, is selection of topic. How do you select a topic is, first of all, you have to mentally realize that you have to select only one topic out of the 10 given topics. What people do is that they sort of start reading those topics and they say, oh, I know this, I don't know this, I know this, I don't know this. No. You have to understand that it is only one essay of 100 marks that you have to attempt. So if you know one well enough, that is sufficient. You do not need to know the entire paper. You do not need to know all the topics in the exam, because you're not going to attempt them, because the demand of the exam is that you only attempt one paper. So mentally prepare yourself, mentally relax yourself by saying that no, even if I don't know these 5 topics, even if I don't know 8 topics, it doesn't matter. Even if I don't know 9 topics in the exam, from the exam, it doesn't matter, because I only have to attempt one essay. So mentally relax yourself, firstly. Secondly, go for familiar topics. If you have read a lot about democracy, if you have read a lot about CPEC, if you have read a lot about social media, then go for such topics which you are familiar with. Do not go for a topic merely because it sounds good and you think you can write it. Avoid literary topics, as they say, because literature is not everybody's cup of tea and it's difficult to grasp what is the requirement of the examiner. So go with a familiar topic, something that you have read in other subjects. That is going to help you. It's going to be easier to write, it's going to be quicker to write, the points will come to you easily because it's a familiar terrain for you. Another thing is that yes, you should go for a familiar topic, something that you've read in current affairs or park affairs, etc. But make sure that when you write an essay, that essay doesn't become a current affairs answer, or it doesn't, when the examiner will start reading it, and if it's a question on CPEC, for example, make sure that it doesn't become an answer to a park affairs question. An English essay must be readable like an English essay, not like an answer to a park affairs question or a current affairs question. If you're writing an essay on global warming, make sure that it doesn't start sounding like a general science and abilities question that you are attempting. So an English essay should be familiarized with an English writing pattern. Another tip I would say is that avoid writing on religious topics. It's not that you cannot attempt it, but it's just a little difficult terrain how to go around it. So I would say that if that's the only familiar topic you are with, then sure, go ahead. But if there are other topics that you think you can write on and you've got an option of writing on religion, I would say do not write on religious topics. Also, in terms of theories, for example, isms, anything with an ISM at the end, you should really know the theory if you're going to attempt that question. For example, feminism. If you're not sure what feminism is, then do not write on it. If you've studied in gender studies, you know what feminism is, then only go ahead. Do not, just because it sounds like a familiar common terminology, feminism, terrorism, just because it sounds familiar doesn't mean you know the concept that well. And another point is that understand the requirement of the topic. What is the requirement of the statement? Read the statement in entirety. Just because a statement has the word global warming does not mean that it has only to do with global warming. Read the complete topic. Sometimes global warming is only what the examiner asks is only how global warming impacts Pakistan. Sometimes global warming, how it impacts the global world. So, understand the requirement of the topic by reading the topic again and again and underlining the key points. Is it national? Is it international? Is it individual level? What is the requirement of the topic? And another subset of that point is, make sure you understand the use of colon and semicolons. For example, if the essay topic is on water crisis, and in water crisis there is a semicolon which then says problems and solutions. Now, if you understand the requirement of the topic, then you will see that the examiner is asking for both problems and solutions. That means you have to give equal points to both the problems as well as the solutions. You do not need to lean on to problems and give little time to solutions, nor vice versa. Both of them will require equal time from the student attempting the exam. So those are the areas that we have covered in selection of topic. I hope that helped. Now we will get to outline, how to write an outline. Now firstly, you have to know that writing an outline in the CSS English essay paper is compulsory. It is written in your exam paper if you read the question that you have to make an outline. So that means there is no way around it. You have to write an outline. Now how do you write an outline? Firstly, spend at least 40 minutes writing an outline. Writing an outline is so important that even I would say, even if you spend 45 minutes writing an outline, it is okay, because it is the entire sketch of your essay. If your outline is correct, then it's very easy to go ahead and write the entire content of the essay. But if you do not know what you're going to write in the essay, then how will you write it? So spend 40 minutes on your outline, work on it, do the rough drafting, make 2 drafts, 3 drafts, whatever necessary. Spend 40 minutes, time is not going ahead. It's fine. Even if you spend 45 minutes, 40 minutes, 30 minutes, minimum 30 minutes on writing an outline. So make sure you spend that much time on it, because it's necessary. Because it is the sketch of what is to come. If you just, it's like the table of contents, if you just know the headings, it will be much easier to write. Now, what is the content of the outline is, you have to give a title of a thesis statement. Now, thesis statement is basically just 2-3 lines of a stance, whether you are pro the topic or against the topic. I would recommend usually that whenever the examiners, they give a topic, it's easier to give points where the examiner is pro the topic. So for example, is terrorism a major cause of problems in 21st century? The answer should usually be, it would be helpful if you just do it pro. You can go against the topic as well, but usually it's more helpful if you just go pro the topic. So a thesis statement you should take a stance in the thesis statement and make it into 2-3 lines. I think that is more than enough. Now, what should the arguments be in the outline? When you are doing brainstorming, now obviously all of this will be done in the rough work firstly. You're not going to directly start writing an outline. You will go on the last page of your booklet and you will write rough draft, and this is where you will be doing all of this rough work. So what are the arguments? When you see a topic and the first thing for example, the topic is on social media and social media revolution, for example, and you see the topic and you say, well, what are my arguments? Maybe you get done by after 2-3 arguments and you don't know what to write. So the solution is, and the easiest solution that I can give you is to divide your arguments into heads, and I will tell you what these heads are. This is very easy. This is the simplest trick in the book. Make a heading of political, economic, social, cultural, psychological. These are the 5 heads under which you can make your arguments. and there will be subheadings to these arguments. For example, for political, there will be 3-4 points, social 3-4 points, economic 3-4 points, cultural 3-4 points, psychological 3-4 points, media another 1 point. That will give you, at least 10 to 12 points very easily, and that's the easiest way to go with writing arguments in an outline. When you just know the heads, because every argument that happens in society revolves around these 4-5 angles. If you know the angle, then it's very easy to write it. So just make your outline based on these 5 heads that I've told you: political, economic, social, cultural, psychological. And that's it. That will be a very easy outline to make. Now, another thing that students ask often is that should we write the arguments as in, argument wise, number 1, number 2, number 3, or should we give headings? For example, political and then subheadings of political, economic and then subheadings of economic, or should we just write 1, 2, 3 numbering of arguments? My answer is that both the options are correct. Both the writing styles are correct. You can write in either way. There's no harm in either way, whichever you're comfortable in. Both are correct. Now, there are some do's and don'ts in writing an outline, in writing an argument. Firstly, you need to understand that, okay, I've told you the heads in which you are going to write, but you need to know that an example is not an argument. For example, Pakistan and India signed the Indus Treaty in 1960. This is, for example, you're writing an essay on water crisis in Pakistan. Now, saying that Pakistan and India signed a water treaty in 1960 is not an argument. It is an example. It is a fact. It has nothing to do with argument. So, example is not an argument. You need to understand that. Argument is something, what are you arguing in it? What's the argument with which you will use those examples to state your facts, to state your argument? So, remember that. Example is not an argument. Definitions. Definitions are not arguments. You're not going to write definitions in your outline. Global warming is this, dash. Terrorism is this, dash. No, these are definitions. Definitions are not arguments. Definitions are not required in outline either. No facts and figures. You will not write any facts and figures in your outline, because that is facts and figures you will write later in your paragraphs to substantiate your arguments. So, no writing facts and figures in your outline. Another trick is that always make a comparative argument. There should be one argument towards the end where you will do a comparative analysis between Pakistan and a developed country, or Pakistan and a developing country, or 2 developed countries, or 2 developing countries of any subject, that is, of an argument. So, do a comparative analysis. That gives you an edge. That makes the examiner, that makes your outline stand out. Another trick is, even if the examiner does not ask the Pakistani perspective, make an argument based on Pakistan. So, even if it is not required, towards the end, before the comparative argument, write an argument on Pakistan. And then at the end, you will just write a heading of conclusion, and in your conclusion, in the outline I'm talking about, the argument about conclusion is you will not come up with anything new in that conclusion, you will simply reiterate your thesis statement. So, that was the end of outline. I hope that helped, dear audience. Now, we will get to another important aspect, that is introduction. How do you write an introduction? Firstly, you can start with a quote. Memorize some quotes that are relatable to every topic. For example, democracy. For example, social media. For example, hope, life lessons, or victory, these something, optimism, these kind of topics, these kind of quotes can be applied to any topics really. So, memorize some of these quotes, and you can apply one quote before beginning your essay. Or if you do not want to write a quote, you can start with a general description. Just generally talk in English, just write anything, something very linguistically easy to read, or general phrases for 3-4 lines, just talking about generally. For example, in Pakistan we see this and this happened and that happened. So talk about something general for 3 to 4 lines. Make sure your introduction is around 1 page. Do not make it too short, do not make it 5 to 6 lines, do not make it 2 pages. Around 1 page is a good introduction. Another, do's and don'ts: no definitions. You will not write any definition in your introduction. Number 2, you will not write any facts and figures in your introduction, because leave the facts and figures for the coming argument making, for the paragraph structure. So no definitions and no facts and figures in your introduction. Now, once you've given the general statement, generally writing about it, and you've written the thesis statement, which is that, are you pro the topic, are you against the topic, or are you balancing the topic? So just look at your outline, go back, look at your outline, and take the 3-4 prominent points that you think are good enough, and just make a summary of it and write it after the thesis statement. That's the easiest introduction to write. Just write 3-4 of those arguments, or 2-3 of those arguments, and summarize them and write them in your own words, as if this is what it's a window to your essay. This is what's coming ahead. That's basically the point. And after you've done that, in the last few statements, just close your introduction and reiterate your thesis statement, that in conclusion, in a nutshell, this is what it is, hence, therefore. So that's it. Introduction is very easy to write. Make it around 1 page, no definitions, no facts and figures. Start with a quote or a general description, write 2-3 arguments, and that's it. Close it up. Close it up with a reiteration of the thesis statement. And of course, no grammatical mistakes and no spelling mistakes, which I have explained firstly, because that is lethal. And an examiner most definitely would read an introduction. An outline and introduction, that I'm pretty sure an examiner reads. So make sure you've gotten that right. Now next comes the paragraph writing. Now imagine that a paragraph is a separate box, okay, and a separate box, it's a separate entity on its own, and the outline that you made with those arguments, so each argument is equal to each argument, each paragraph. One argument is equal to one paragraph. Okay, remember the rule. One argument is equal to one paragraph. And introduction is also in one paragraph. Make sure that you don't, think that you are going to write and break down the introduction into paragraphs. No, introduction is one paragraph, and an argument is equal to one paragraph. And each paragraph is its own solid entity. How is it a solid entity? Because each paragraph has its own thesis statement. Now, what is the thesis statement of that argument, of that paragraph? For example, you wrote about social media. Your topic is on social media revolution, and your argument is that it has enhanced, social media revolution has enhanced, for example, this is an example, social media revolution has enhanced public journalism, civic journalism. So, you will begin your paragraph writing by stating this, that social media revolution has given birth to civic journalism. This can be, now this is your thesis statement or your argument itself, and to prove that thesis statement, you are going to write facts and figures, which I told you not to write in your outline, which I told you not to write in your introduction. Now in your paragraph, you will write the facts and figures. The facts and figures and references to books, quotations, these are the things now you're going to write in that paragraph. Years, in 1945 World War II ended, yeah, you will write that. Make sure you have one figure, numerical figure in your paragraph. It can be a percentage, okay, 57% of people say this, or it can be World War II ended in 1945. So, those are numbers, they stand out. In an English essay, they stand out. So make sure that you write at least one numerical argument in your paragraph. These can be facts and figures and years. Write books. You can give reference to one book. And once you've done the facts and figures, then you're going to close it up. You're going to close that box, close the lid of that box by writing a conclusion to that thesis statement of that paragraph. What will be the conclusion of the paragraph on civic journalism? You will write hence or therefore civic journalism has been promoted due to the social media revolution. So you'll close it up with hence, therefore, in a nutshell, these sort of words that you're going to write. So I hope you've understood the paragraph writing structure. I'll explain it again. Paragraph writing structure is that it's a separate entity on its own. Each paragraph has its own thesis statement, which you will take from the outline that you wrote, and you're going to substantiate it with facts and figures, and you're going to close it up with writing its conclusion, which will support the thesis statement of that argument. You will go to the next argument, and that next paragraph, one argument is equal to one paragraph. That paragraph will have its own structure. It will be a solid figure on its own, and you're going to write the thesis statement of that paragraph, substantiate it with proof, and then close it up with the conclusion of its own. Then you go to the next paragraph, start with the thesis statement of its argument, give facts and figures, give examples, and then close it up with the thesis statement of its own. You're going to continue doing this, and because you've done all your homework before, you've written the outline, you've done the introduction, so it's very easy and very smoothly written. At the end, you will write the conclusion. Now, what is in a conclusion? One very important thing is that you're not going to write anything new in a conclusion. No new ideas in a conclusion. Conclusion is basically a summation of everything that has already been written. So you cannot give new ideas. You can only repeat those ideas which you've already mentioned in your essay. And always start with a conclusion with a word that explains to the examiner that this is the conclusion. For example, quote, in conclusion, unquote, or quote, in a nutshell, unquote. So the examiner knows that the conclusion has come. Otherwise, he'll just be reading it and think you haven't written the conclusion, because he doesn't have that much time to go through it, and perhaps, so it's always easier to, when you're writing the conclusion, you're finally writing the conclusion, write the words in conclusion or in a nutshell. No new arguments in a conclusion, as I've mentioned before. And basically, you can even say that the conclusion is a summary of the introduction. If your introduction is 1 page, so make it half, make the conclusion half. So your conclusion is going to be 5-6 lines. And it's going to be a further summary of the introduction. You're going to invert it. The introduction was telling you what is to come, and the conclusion is telling you what has already happened before. And 5 to 6 lines are sufficient. So make sure you don't give any new ideas in your conclusion. So that was the end of it. Of essay writing. I hope that helped. That was sufficient enough. And in my conclusion to this, I will say that the only solution to excelling in an essay exam is practice. Do not read about essay writing. Do not read about how to write a good essay, and do not read other people's essays, but start writing your own essay, because practice is the only way you're going to get a good score in the exam. It's not a reading examination, it's a writing examination. And do not fear failure itself. Do not fear, oh, what if I make a mistake? What if I make a grammatical mistake? Better to make a mistake now than to make it in the exam hall. So practice as much as you can and get it checked by somebody. That's the only way forward. So practice, practice, and practice more. So I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope it was helpful to attempt a CSS English essay exam paper, and I shall see you guys next week, and hopefully with more CSS content for now. So thank you very much for listening. Do watch and subscribe to my channel if you like what I have to say. So I shall see you, dear audience, next week. Bye bye.